More people than ever are coming to Nomad Capitalist, prioritizing their personal freedom above things like tax savings or lifestyle in other countries. And today I'm going to share with you some real-world examples of places that people are moving if they value personal freedom first. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. Now, go where you're treated best is very important to me, and people think it has to mean tax. And for many years, people that we helped wanted to legally reduce their taxes. What we've seen over the years as Western governments get more and more greedy, you see more people who don't want to pay the higher rates. It's somewhat psychological. People are saying, you know what, I was okay paying 37%, but now that it's 42%, it's just becoming too much, and now I'm going to look for somewhere else to go. We continue to see that with the crypto revolution, more people becoming successful with that, more people becoming successful with online businesses, etc. But what I am seeing more of is people who value their personal freedom above all else, and they're saying, where can I go and just live in freedom? Now, I've spent the last over a year now, traveling all over the world between Latin America, Eastern Europe, even occasionally Western Europe. Those have been the primary places that I've been. Not so much in Asia, not in Africa, not in the US or Canada or certainly Australia. But I've been able to pretty successfully maneuver. Never got COVID. I've been in numerous different countries where I have homes. I've been in countries as tourists. And so I've been pretty successful at doing that by going to countries that are not the ones everyone's talking about. And so I think that when you look at freedom first, you have to understand that there are some countries that you may not have thought about that much, but that's because they're not in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Western European bubble. And so when someone comes to me today, I'm asking them, how do you allocate your 100 percentage points between your finances, your freedom, and your lifestyle? And among people who put freedom way up at the top, here's where they're going. One place I've seen a couple people go is Nicaragua. This is a relatively tax-friendly country in Central America, of course. You do actually need to live there to get a residence permit and to keep your residence permit, but having a residence permit is relatively affordable. It doesn't require a huge investment, as is the case in many places in Latin America. There's different ways that you can do it. So it's a relatively low cost of entry, relatively tax-friendly residence permit where things are pretty open right now. And so people have been moving, including some very wealthy people have said, I'm going to go to Nicaragua. I've been in Nicaragua. It's been a couple years. I certainly prefer the southern part of the country, San Juan del Sur. I have heard a few stories that are not as flattering from down there, but I generally found it to be pretty safe. Nicaragua was the country where in the capital, where I don't think almost anyone is moving, I had a gun put in my face, so I probably wouldn't want to go back there. You've got Grenada, the more colonial vibe. You've got some surfing up in the north where it's really hot, like Leon, Chinandega. So you have people who are going to Nicaragua because Costa Rica has become a little bit less free. Nicaragua is a bit more of that southern Central America vibe than what you would get from like in El Salvador or Honduras, which are perhaps a little bit less safe. So Nicaragua has been a place where people have been going. Another place that a couple people have been going, at least part-time, is Brazil. And so Brazil was one of the countries that has been relatively open over the last year and a half. They've been welcoming to tourists. We see some of the restrictions now easing up. And so while this is not necessarily a tax-friendly country, I have had people who are interested in dating, interested in getting married. If you marry or have a Brazilian child, you can work towards Brazilian citizenship pretty quickly. So this is one of those ones where I tell people, listen, you're not going to have the tax friendliness necessarily, but you can have the personal freedom. And that's a choice that people have to make. I mean, look at some of the most tax-friendly countries in the world right now. They are more restrictive. It is harder to get into them. And so I think people are starting to have to make a decision. Again, Nicaragua, nice confluence. You're losing the lifestyle, but you're getting the tax and you're getting the personal freedom. Brazil, great place to go and spend part of your year. If you're going to spend the full year there, it's not going to be nearly as tax friendly. Obviously, you've got a wide open country. You've got so many different places that you can go. A lot of people prefer the south of Brazil. You've got investments all up and down the coast. Rio has been opening up. And so, by the way, you can get a great permanent residence pathway by buying real estate. And with the currency down, which we talked about in recent months, it may be an opportunity for someone who wants to make that a base in their trifecta to enjoy a certain amount of personal freedom in South America with a possible pathway to citizenship, as well as a certain amount of personal freedom if you can handle the taxes. Either you don't mind paying them or you can keep them at bay. Another place people are going is one we've talked about a lot. A lot of people have been talking about it, is Mexico. Relatively straightforward residence permit to get. Unlike Brazil, you're not going to have to invest a substantial amount of money into real estate, low six-figure amount in Brazil. Mexico, you can get in without really investing much at all in many cases. And so, again, big country, lots of places to go. People get scared by Mexico, but I have people looking at Cabo, people looking at Puerto Vallarta increasingly. I hear that a lot. People looking, south of Guadalajara, Lake Chapala, that area. You have Merida, perhaps the safest city in Mexico. You have the whole Riviera Maya. Now, you've seen a less safe issue in my least favorite place in Mexico, Tulum, but I still think there are parts on that Riviera that are great. I'm a big fan of Mexico City, areas like Polanco, Lomas, even Roma Norte, along Reforma, beautiful area. You see new, hotels and new things coming into Mexico City. So lots going on there. Again, interesting tax system. Probably not a place you should be spending full time, but a great place that you could, start to put together your bases. You can see a lot of these countries in the Americas have been more personally free, and the benefit is, with the exception of Brazil, you can build up your Spanish skills and you can travel in between them. Another place people are going is Colombia. Now, Colombia's been open. You don't need a test even to come to Colombia from a COVID perspective. Now, people in Colombia are very polite. People are very nice. People do, I think naturally, in Colombia, they are a bit more concerned about what's going on in the world. And so you see people who are wearing masks. You also see people who aren't wearing masks. And so, you do have a good amount of personal freedom. I feel pretty personally safe. And I think there's plenty of areas in Colombia where you can live relatively safely, perhaps not as safely as in Dubai or Qatar or Georgia or Singapore. But I really don't have any problems in Colombia, and I think you can set your life up in a way that you don't. So Colombia has increasingly been moving towards personal freedom. You look at some of these Latin American countries, certainly there's an ebb and flow in these countries. There's a certain passion where things change. But I think that Colombia has been one where people have been moving. You've seen George Gammon talk about Colombia. I have a number of people who spend a good part of their year here, where they can keep some of their cheaper residence permits going, like starting a company, yet not fall into the quite egregious tax net. And so there's a way that you can thread that needle. So Colombia is one place where I have a number of people moving to or already living in, or establishing as a plan B by buying real estate, getting their residence, and then keeping it here just in case. South of Colombia, Ecuador, I have one or two people who are looking at this. Again, I've talked about how some of the best land deals in South America, relatively open. What's interesting is if you just want to get away from it all, I think, land in especially parts of southern Ecuador, not so much along the coast, but southern Ecuador, interesting place to buy affordable land, build something, or maybe there's already something there. That's a great place to get away from it all and just enjoy personal freedom. Now, they say Ecuador, people in Ecuador, not quite as welcoming as, let's say, in Colombia or other parts of Latin America. But if you want to get away from it all, Ecuador may be an option. I've also had a couple people ask me about it. Again, not quite as tax-friendly as, let's say, in Nicaragua or even in Costa Rica. But, I know people who are looking at properties along the coast. And so there are people who are moving there, and they're finding it rather unrestricted. And so that's the place people are talking about. One other place in the Americas, but this time in the Caribbean, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, but Grenada, which is one of the citizenship by investment countries. What people have told me in the last year and a half they like about Grenada in particular is, number one, further out of the hurricane belt. They do, get some hurricanes from time to time, but not as many as you'd see further north. And so for that reason, the fact that they've been a bit more open than some of the other islands have been in the Caribbean, I have had people who are saying, when it comes to Caribbean citizenship, I like that country seems more open-minded, and they've chosen that as a place where maybe they'll spend some time as a citizen, but they have it in their back pocket. They like the way that the government's thinking. Not to say that the other Caribbean citizenship countries are bad, but this is, again, when people are telling me, they say they're studying what's happening and they like Grenada. In Europe, the one country I can really point to where people who are really high on personal freedom are talking about moving to, and actually moving to, is in Serbia. We've talked about that before, and I continue to talk to people who say, I've got a friend who's in Serbia, and he's saying, we're really leaving people alone. It's just, wide open. And, just in a general context, I think you have countries in Latin America where, again, there is kind of a fire and a passion and things change sometimes. But you look in Eastern Europe, these countries that are closer to Europe, Serbia in particular, Albania is one where people aren't moving to, at least that I'm talking to, but I think you could put in the same category. They don't want to go back to restricting people's freedoms in a number of different ways. Serbia, I think, has been a great example of that. There were some curfews last year, but I think generally speaking, my experience there has been pretty positive. Different vibe than Latin America, but out of Europe, that is one that really has stood out, that people have consistently talked about and are acting on. Now, if you buy real estate there, you can get a residence permit, but you are going to have to spend some time committed to the country. Another one that people aren't necessarily moving to, but I think is relatively open, is Armenia. And that has been more open than other countries and more personally free than other countries in the region, in the Caucasus. So Armenia could also go in that list. Again, not an exhaustive list. If one of these countries stands out to you, leave a comment below. I want to know what your thoughts are. This is not necessarily my list again. This is where people who are saying, listen, Andrew, I'm all for tax savings, that's great, but you know what? I want to feel a sense of freedom. I don't feel free in the United States anymore. People tell me, for 2, 5, 10 years even, I haven't felt free in the United States. Or, I felt Australia was going the wrong direction. And I've said, listen, I was in Australia 4.5 years ago, and I felt it to be less free than the United States. And the United States has a certain amount of personal freedom, but I just kind of felt like you're always looking out for the thing to happen next. And so for people who feel that way, for people who just want to be left alone, don't bother me, these are some of the countries that they're interested in. I do want to hear your comments on which one you like the best. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.